Before we jump into this week's conversation with forensic accountant Tracy Coenen, I have a quick message to share. While listening, you'll hear us discuss an online divorce money guide that Tracy created. It primarily helps women tackle financial issues during their divorce. However, it's not just for this audience. I want all listeners to know they can benefit from this resource. Also, we begin our conversation by discussing the cost of hiring Tracy as a forensic accountant. However, not everyone in our podcast audience may have the means or need in their divorce to hire a forensic accountant. So stick around and we will talk about what's covered in her online divorce money guide, which should help the 90% of people going through a divorce who would benefit from this topic without the need to hire an outside expert. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy today's conversation. Welcome to the Getting Divorced podcast. This is Corey Shapiro. We have a special podcast today. We have a conversation with Tracy Coenen, who's a certified public accountant and certified in financial forensics. She has 25 years experience, and she has sort of switched gears and originally was helping, I think, lawyers and other professionals in these high money divorces. But she realized that basically 90% of us who are going through a divorce don't need that cost. But she's using her experience, her nuanced understanding in finding the money. Think Jerry Maguire, Show Me the Money, and really helping people out in this sort of do-it-yourself movement that is really taking over divorce, but not just for collaborative. I don't want you to think this is only for collaborative. This is for combative, and this can help people who really just want to save a lot of money, because we're going to find out all about forensic. She has a great, I guess, thought leadership, if we call that. She's written books for ABA and on Amazon, and you can find all about her at fraudcoach.com. The book that we're going to be talking about is Find Me the Money, and also her podcast, Find Me the Money. And also we're going to talk about, most importantly, the divorce money guide. So first of all, welcome to the show, Tracy.
Thank you. That was a really great introduction. It was probably one of the better ones that I've had.
Well, see, already, if you're going to hire a professional, it's really good to get this feedback. So I'm going to consider Tracy our professional for today. We have her for our call. And when you sign up for this online course, which we'll get about, I think I've been through the course myself. I think she sort of handholds you through a lot, not all. I think it's forensic light, but I think it's enough, so much more than probably your spouse is doing. And it really helps a lot of people. So let's just start off with the basic question for people who are listening to this. Most people are like, well, what is a forensic? What do I need one? And, how much is that? So can you explain that for us?
A forensic accountant is a fraud investigator. So I do fraud investigations, a lot of that on the corporate side where executives are stealing money or doing something shady with the money in a company. Some of it's on the personal side, as you mentioned, doing divorce cases and finding money there. How much have we been spending? Where is the money? How much is there? Why isn't there more? And forensic accountants are expensive. In a divorce case, it's probably pretty easy to spend $10,000 to $20,000 on a forensic accountant, but most people don't need that level of assistance in their case. But if they have some concerns about the money, they're not sure, is this everything? Is my spouse hiding something from me? Or if they've just not been involved with the money in their marriage, and now they're saying, I want to understand what's going on with the money, what's been going on, but I don't know where to start. The divorce money guide is that option. It is, like you said, a bit of a do-it-yourself option where I walk them through literally what is the financial part of your divorce and what's going to happen there. What kind of financial documents do you need? How do you get them? And what do you look for in them once you have them?
So important. All right. Now, that's great. Thank you, Tracy. Now, how much does it cost if someone was going to hire you to do sort of a bespoke, complicated forensic? What is that your minimum retainer for that?
My minimum is $15,000.
Right. And it reminds me of like a minimum spend at a wedding. I'm getting married in March, and they say, oh, it's a minimum spend. but the minimum spend
Yes.
doesn't mean it's a cap. Is that right?
Right. Most of my divorce cases that I work on probably end up being between about $25,000 and $35,000 of fees. I start with $15,000 as the smallest engagement that I will take on. There are certainly people who do smaller engagements than that. In my earlier days of work, I did smaller engagements. I would do a $5,000 engagement, things like that. As my business has evolved over the years, I've just gotten to where if I'm doing one-on-one consulting and I'm actually doing the forensic work and digging into the financials, that's sort of the size of case that I like, that size and above. So that's why we instituted that minimum.
Also, when you work with a professional, even if you're going to use a divorce money guide, which we're going to get into, this could help you save costs when you're talking to your attorney and when you're talking to your experts. A lot of what I do in my divorce, or people are just sort of, I think, a little lazy or maybe overwhelmed. And I just sort of have my paralegal do a lot of things that people can do on their own. And I'm sure it's very similar in the forensic space. Is that right?
It's true. People could have your paralegal sort through a bunch of bank statements and credit card statements and put them in order by date and flip through them and look for certain kinds of transactions. But even though it's just your paralegal, no offense intended, but paralegals cost less than the attorneys. It's still going to end up in total probably costing several $100, maybe a couple $1,000 that someone could do that work themselves. It's really not that hard to take bank statements and put them in order by date, is it? So some of those kinds of things are really simple things that people can do to save them money in their divorces. And those things don't require any accounting skills or any number skills.
That's right. That's exactly so true. And what I always tell people is, everyone has a zone of genius. And my zone of genius is not putting documents in order. And I'm sure your zone of genius is not that either. It's really thinking of things that you really share. So let's get into it in the Divorce Money Guide. Tell us a little bit about this guide and who's the intended audience.
The Divorce Money Guide is for anyone who's going through divorce and wants to understand more about their money, potentially find hidden money, wasted money. They think there's some sort of money shenanigans that could have occurred. This will give them the tools to be able to dig into the finances, to find the answers to their questions. And what was really important for me in creating this was that it would be really easy to follow. So it's on an online learning platform. It's set up like a video course. It's do it yourself at your own pace. You don't have to do all the steps. You can do them in any order, choose what you want to do. But in each step, there is a PDF, like a little ebook that you can read. There's a video that goes along with it if you prefer to watch a video, or if you're like me, you would do both at the same time. Same exact material covered in the ebook versus the video. And then we've got worksheets and checklists that help guide you through, here's a big list of documents that you should think about gathering and go through and consider all of them and check them off. Tools like that hopefully make it easier to get through this process.
Totally. I've been through the Divorce Money Guide myself. Of course, I have some experience in the divorce space, so it's maybe a little easier for me. But I do feel that this is what I love about it. You have one video that gives you an introduction and you make some jokes and stuff and you really try to bring it down, like the red with flags or how you pronounce certain,
Yes.
depending on where you live. It's funny because this is hard stuff and it gives your mind a little break. And she says it over and over again. Please don't do what I did and deep dive and spend hours doing it. It's just a little bit each day. And that's what she sets it up.
Yes.
And then she has, okay, so you do the intro and you're like, maybe I can actually do the training video. And then she has an in-depth training video that sort of reminds me of like a college professor who just tells you how it is. Like, this is how it is. And with, and with the PDFs. And you could watch that. What's great is you could watch it a few times. You might not get it the first time. You might be like, oh, it's 8 minutes, 9 minutes. I don't know if I can even do it. Here's what I tell people. A divorce is like an onion. And you come back to stuff to get really, really good at it. And I'm sure...
And you peel back the layers, right?
Yeah. You're peeling back the layers. That's how you get great. I always tell people I'm not a genius, but if I think about it enough, I'm going to uncover things that maybe is going to really help us. And I think that's what this is doing to start before you come to your attorney or before you even go and spend all this money on someone like Tracy. All right, so that's great. So I see a lot of people come to me and they're so stressed.
they're overwhelmed. And that's sort of why I'm doing this podcast, Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind. And I think that's what happened in my own, my mother, my family. I wasn't divorced, but my mom, I think, got really stressed and made some bad decisions that not long term. And it might be just overwhelming even to think about documents and tax returns. How do you speak to those types of people who are just grieving and so emotional about their divorce? Can they still do the divorce money guide?
Of course they can do the divorce money guide. Here's the thing is I've been through hundreds of divorces with clients over the last 25 years. And so I really understand how difficult and emotional it is. And I never want to discount that piece of it. But I want to say that sometimes focusing on a task, focusing on something very fact-based can actually be very therapeutic in the process. It kind of takes your mind off the emotions of it. So if we can make some progress in the divorce and keep our minds off the emotional aspect for a while, I feel like we've really gotten a win there. But make no mistake, I don't also discount how difficult it can be to go through the finances. And you might be finding some information about the money that's uncomfortable, that's upsetting. So there's a whole component there. But what I found in working with people is that there is fear around the money. The people are intimidated. They don't know where to start. They don't know how to dig into it. So what I wanted to do with the divorce money guide was create a process around it that was broken down into bite-sized pieces where people could manage it really easily and not feel so overwhelmed. So broke it down into 10 steps, then started selling it, getting people into it and using it. And they were like, wait, 10 steps sounds like a lot. I thought it sounded easy. And people said, "No, actually, if you've never looked at the divorce money guide, 10 steps sounds like a lot and it sounds kind of hard." So what we did then was put together a quick start guide to show someone how, if you were willing to take 2 to 3 hours a week, you could get through the entire divorce money guide in a month or less, right? So make it even easier to think about how do I get through this? 10 steps sounds like a lot, but with the quick start guide, like here, the first week, spend a couple hours doing this. Done. You're done with it for the week. So that's how we're trying to present this stuff to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, and I think you really do a good job, Tracy, with that support. So well done. So you talked about 10 steps. I want to go, if you can, just go very briefly, just an introduction. It sort of reminds me of David Ramsey with his baby steps, but we're not going to get into each step in detail, but we're just going to just give a broad strokes of the roadmap. And I do think that's what Tracy is amazing at. She gave you a roadmap. She gave you checklists. She gives you quizzes. She's making you do something that seems very, open-ended, and she makes it linear. And it's a really great roadmap. So let's go over the 10 steps, if you will, just very briefly.
We start with step 1, plan for your divorce, where we are talking about some of the things that I want you to do to protect yourself as you're getting ready to potentially enter the divorce process. The divorce money guide can be used by you even if you're not divorcing yet. You might just be thinking about it. You might be saying, what is my financial future going to look like if I did get divorced? So we start there with some things that I want you to do to protect yourself. Then we go into step 2, that divorce process, where I help educate people on what's going to happen in this financial part of your divorce. What are some of the important legal terms you're going to hear? Because I want you to understand. I don't like that clients come into the process and someone throws around the word interrogatories and the client has no idea what they're talking about. So I educate on that. We go into step 3, the red flags of fraud, where we're talking about you might have seen some signs in your spouse that have you concerned. You might have seen some signs with the money that have you concerned. Let's evaluate these signs. Let's know what they are and evaluate them to kind of come to a conclusion of, do I really have something to worry about or not? Step 4, we gather the account statements. So this is where I'm walking people, what statements to gather, the bank accounts, the credit card accounts, and how you get those statements and how you would organize them. Step 5, we gather the tax returns. Why this step is really interesting, I think, is because many times in divorce, your spouse will hold the tax returns hostage. The one who prepared them with TurboTax or had them prepared with an accountant isn't wanting to turn them over. It's a game people play so often. Show people how you can go directly to the IRS and get your tax returns all on your own. You don't even need your spouse. So that's super exciting to me.
Yeah, before you go on, the IRS, these tax returns and just these documents, when she's saying a game, This could be a nightmare game, but it is a game the way we look at it as professionals, but it's a really sad game that escalates cost, that increases the time and makes things so difficult. I bet you if someone hired in a divorce, someone like Tracy on a complicated matter, and they gave her the actual documents, how much time would that save you? If someone said like, okay, fine, you really don't trust me? Here's all my documents, 100%, I swear to God. I mean, would that decrease your time by like at least 80%? Because I think most of what I do is just actually getting the documents.
Well, fortunately for me, I don't have to get the documents. I let the attorney and the client get the documents. I work with them once the documents come in. But I will tell you, when we're getting documents piecemeal, when we're getting documents that purposely have gaps in them, so we get a whole mess of bank statements, but there are months missing here or there, and I have to go through and figure out what's missing, certainly that does increase costs.
Okay, so after you're gathering the tax returns, what's your next step?
Now we get into analyzing things. Step 6 is analyzing the statements. Step 7 is analyzing the tax return. So in those two steps, I am showing you exactly what to look for, what kinds of transactions might be important, how you can find them on the statements or the tax returns, how you might document that for your attorney. Then step 8 is other compensation. So when people have special issues, maybe they are married to someone who is a corporate executive, maybe they have a family business involved, maybe they have some issues like someone works overtime or gets weird bonuses at work. We talk about what to do with those things. And then we are getting towards the end with step 9, will I get what I deserve? Where we're really focusing on, you have a lot of information. What do you do with it now so that you can get some results in court, so that you can use it as a negotiating tool, things like that. And step 10, putting it all together. How do you put this in a nice, pretty package to present to your attorney so something can actually be done?
Okay, so Tracy, if you're okay with it, I want to pick 2 steps that really resonated with me, and I think hopefully will resonate with my listeners, that I want to ask you some questions and go over it. Is that okay?
It's okay as long as you pick the right steps. Which ones you got?
Okay. All right. Well, maybe as you said, I already hinted step 4, gather the documents. Maybe that's just like a lawyer issue, but also for the client issue. And let me explain a little bit about this, why this is so difficult. Because for some reason, I thought when I was a baby lawyer, like you send like an email, maybe a letter, maybe what we call a discovery notice to the other side, and they actually give you what you ask for. I've come to realize they don't. Now, in a lot of cases, in a collaborative case, they will, but in a combative case, they don't. So you might be thinking, well, don't you just go to court? Well, going to court is like going to war. First of all, it's very expensive. And secondly, the court, for some reason, on these what we call discovery matters, they don't really drop the hammer, at least the first or second time. So it's really hard to get documents. And so what I liked about your step 4, and it's smart, and I want to go into it, is how do you get documents that you can get? Because it is a challenge sometimes to get documents that the other person has full control over. So that's what I would like you to help us understand a little bit more.
When I've been going through this process with clients, to me, attorneys and accountants say to a client, go get your bank statements, and they expect the client to know exactly what to do. And to me, getting bank statements is easy because this is the world I work in. But to many clients who have not been actively involved with their finances, if I say, go get your bank statements, they're going to say, where do I start? That was the point of this step, is to give someone a roadmap of where to start. So you start by logging into online banking if you have access. If your name is on an account, you should be able to get access to that online banking. You log in, you look for a documents or statement section of the website, and whatever is there available for download, I say download it all, save it somewhere secure, in the cloud, in a service like Dropbox or Google Drive, something like that. If for some reason you're not able to get access to online banking, maybe your bank says, well, there's only one login allowed per your account, and that login already exists, and maybe your spouse has it and won't give you the password. What's your next step? You could literally walk into your bank with your identification and say, I want my account statements. So those are the two most common ways to get the account statements. And I find that people aren't aware. And then once I tell them, they're like, hey, this is actually pretty easy now that I know what to do.
Right. I think it's true. We underestimate, because we do it all the time, how challenging it is. And I think one thing you do great is you really do handhold people through the system. It reminds me of a study that doctors become very callous to the patient experience, but they say that doctors should be a patient and go through the experience. And I just had an experience with my
Mhm.
cousin who had surgery, and just being in that environment post surgery is very strange. It's not comfortable. There's all these people around, all these noises, everyone's bothering you after every 5-10 minutes. So to have someone look at this process for a first time and think about a better way of doing it, what you're just suggesting, I think is great. Because if a doctor actually was that surgeon who did that, went into that bed and looked around, they'd be like, this is not appropriate in 2023. This is terrible. But that's what we have.
Right.
This is what we have. So you're right. That's really great. And if you feel that support that Tracy's doing, that's what she does and more in her course. So that's great. So, okay. So that's one step that resonated with me. And another step that resonated with me is step 8, which is that other compensation, and particularly businesses. I practice in Manhattan, and a lot of people are self-employed or have business interests. And I don't think people really understand business income. I think people understand W-2 income. That's just, work for, if you work for Apple and you get a W-2, that's probably what you make. But if you have your own business, I want you to go into gross receipts and how a business owner could, not all, really manipulate their income. And I think that's what you go in on step 8. And that's what I want to talk to you about here.
Right. When someone has a business interest involved in a divorce, many times it makes it more complicated. And that's where you're starting to maybe think about getting a forensic accountant involved. Certainly, if you have to have the business valued, meaning put a number on it for what it's worth, that's something you need a forensic accountant type of person for. But it's really important for you to understand, like you said, how that income can be manipulated. So someone has a business, let's say they provide accounting services for a living, right? Their clients pay them money every month, every quarter, every year, whatever the case may be. And when you're getting divorced, that business owner is going to say, I want to reduce that. I want to make it look like I'm not making any money. And so they might start a new business that you don't know about and shuttle some of those clients over to that new business. They're still providing the services, but the income is not coming through that business that you know about. There are lots of shady techniques like that. What's most important, I think, for the average person to understand is that if your spouse is self-employed, we want to think very critically about whatever numbers they come to court with. They're most likely, if they're like most people who have a business, they're going to come to court and say, business is down. I'm not making as much as I used to. And we want to be real skeptical of that. It's way too coincidental that once divorce was filed, the income went down. And certainly the stories are, well, golly gee, I'm so sad because I'm getting divorced and I just can't work and that's why it's
Yeah,
down.
happens all the time.
But I mean, absolutely, yeah, sure. So we talk in that step about some of the issues like that.
Okay, can you explain, very interesting to me when you have a business and then you have this and you look at a tax return, which Tracy goes over, but then you have something called retained earnings. Because it seems to me you could just not, like in those big, those hedge funders, like I make so much money, I can defer it. It seems what you can do as a business owner is just not give yourself salary, which I know is getting a little complicated, and hopefully Tracy will explain to us, but then you can just retain it. And then you say to the judge, yes, my
Right.
business made $1 million. I only took 100,000. But then you look on the tax return and it says, 500,000 retained. Does that mean that 500,000 should have been income, or is it really a business expense?
Retained earnings is one of those concepts that trips people up because the technical aspects of it are a little confusing. It is a very technical accounting concept, but the way I tell people in the real world to think about it is we made money and we left it in the business. Maybe we're going to use it for future growth. Maybe next year we want to buy a new piece of machinery. And so we're leaving money in the business or something of that sort. That would be a normal reason to leave money in the business. Again, things are usually different in the divorce scenario. In the divorce scenario, They're leaving money in the business many times because they don't want that to look like income. They don't want to be on the hook for potentially paying alimony or child support based on that higher income. And so when I'm involved in divorce cases, I'm usually standing in front of the divorce court judge saying, he chose to not take that money out of the business. He chose to leave that money in the business, and he may have whatever reasons he has. But at the end of the day, that money is his to do with as he wishes. And so we should count it as income because it's his, it belongs to him, whether he withdrew the money from the business or not.
One thing actually reminded me, because you're using that he pronoun, and I know you market to women. I want to say this information is for women and men. I know that most people who make the most money, maybe now it's very changing, has been historically men. But I do think if you want support, if you are like when you hear tax returns and you hear documents and that gives you a little anxiety, which, to tell you the truth, for me, I came into it more on the custody side and I became a certified divorce financial analyst, which I think was great, but it's not, numbers are not my life. I really enjoy more the custody aspects. I think this is really good. So I don't want you to think, if you're a man and you're listening, this is only for women. It's not, even though I know Tracy markets that. Okay, Tracy, I got something else for you, which I was thinking, great. We're only focusing on divorce here, but then I looked on your website, fraudcoach.com. Okay, that's a divorce money guide, and you can look at it. I think it's great and get your support. But there's two other guides, and I didn't take them, but the titles interest me. The second one, I'm going to talk about the first one first, which doesn't interest me as much. But the second one, which I want to end with, really does interest me. Okay, so the first one I saw is you have a post-divorce money guide. Are those different courses, a whole different thing, or is that just taking samplings of what you did?
It's a whole different course. It's set up in a similar fashion. The post-divorce money guide is to help people understand all the moves that they need to make with their money to protect themselves financially after the divorce is over. Things like change your beneficiary on your life insurance, change your beneficiary on your retirement accounts. That's one step where we talk about changing those types of things. One of the steps we talk about making sure that your ex is no longer on any bank accounts or credit card accounts with you, and digging into your credit report and things like that to make sure that you don't have any joint accounts out there that still exist that potentially someday could come back to haunt you. So it's really protecting yourself after that divorce is over. And to me, as easy as the things I just mentioned sound, to the average person, these are things they haven't thought about. And there's a lot of issues that you have to think about. So that's what that course walks people through.
Those two pieces of information could be worth the course itself. I have
Right.
experience where, unbeknownst to my clients, the other side who has not a joint account, so their own account, but because they have their banking information, put expenses like their rent on their account. So be careful. You might want to even have to change account numbers if someone has all your banking information. Right. And that's scary. So I think those types of things, it's almost like a post-divorce closing memo. That is fantastic. Right. You don't have to go to your attorney, spend so much money. This is the DIY movement. Tracy's really doing a great job there. Okay, the last one I saw on there for a guide, an online guide, and I think it's great because I always tell people we begin with the end in mind. So the end in mind is the worst case scenario is in a marriage is a divorce. So when do we think about a divorce? A lot of people are doing prenups. And if you're not doing a prenups, you really should understand some of these concepts. And that's why I thought your marriage money guide, which I didn't look at yet, but it sounds like that's right up that alley. Is that the topics you're speaking about in that money guide?
Right. It's all about protecting yourself financially. And on the front end, really taking control of the finances so that if something did go south in your marriage, that you'd be prepared for it. And the marriage money guide I did for women specifically, and it lays out for them, how you and your future spouse could talk about money, have those conversations, important issues that you need to consider, how you might manage the money together. Are you going to have separate accounts? Are you going to combine all your money? Are you going to do a little bit of both where we have some separate money and some combined money? And, we talk about the prenups and important considerations in the prenup. That I'm certainly not a lawyer, so it's not from a legal perspective, but it's the practical considerations about the money that you need to think about with the prenups, and really just getting on the same page with budgeting and finance before you get married.
All right, listen, Tracy, I don't want to take more of your time. I really appreciate you giving all these tips today. And I really appreciate that you're using your experience, your hard fought experience at a high level and really helping the 90% of people who don't need your services. And that's really what I do on this podcast. And I think your videos, your breaking down, your documentation, the quizzes, I think it gets people into the reality that this is a financial issue we're dealing with, and we have to really roll up our sleeves, but you're not alone. And you don't necessarily just have to go to these high, expensive, high powered attorneys or professionals. You can get a little education that's really coming from a great place. So, Tracy, thank you so much for being on the show. And I hope anyone who's listened to this gets value out of it. You can go again to thefraudcoach.com. And my hope is you're going to come out financially unscathed.
Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk about, everything that I put my heart and soul into with the Divorce Money Guide.
Yeah, no, you really did put your heart and soul. And what I want to say is I always tell people to be creative, not reactive. And this is Action Point. This is a coach who's going to take you through being creative in the financial space. So thank you, Tracy. Keep on doing great work.
Thanks, Corey.